He's here. I can feel it.
Every once in a while, Hollywood drops a piece of news that instantly wakes up an entire generation of movie fans. And recently, that exact thing happened. Because after decades of speculation, rumors, and wishful thinking, one of the most iconic crime films ever made is officially getting a continuation. Heat 2 is real. And if you know anything about the original film, you already understand why that announcement alone is enough to send crime movie fans into full detective mode. But before we even talk about the sequel, there's something important I want to revisit. Because if Heat 2 really is on the way, there's another Michael Mann film that suddenly feels incredibly relevant again. A film that shares the same DNA, the same obsession with criminals and the people chasing them, and strangely enough, it's a movie that many people barely talk about anymore. I'm talking about Public Enemies. Now before we dive into what Heat 2 might look like, I want to rewind for a moment, back to 1995, because that's when Michael Mann released Heat, a 3-hour crime epic that changed the way Hollywood approached heist movies forever. The story follows two men standing on opposite sides of the law. On one side is Detective Vincent Hanna, played by Al Pacino. On the other side is Master Thief Neil McCauley, portrayed by Robert De Niro. What makes Heat so legendary isn't just the action or the famous downtown Los Angeles shootout. It's the psychological tension between two professionals who understand each other better than anyone else. They're enemies, but they're also mirrors, and that cat and mouse dynamic is what turned Heat into one of the most respected crime films ever made. Now fast forward more than 30 years. When news broke that Michael Mann is officially developing Heat 2, fans immediately started asking the same question: how do you follow up a film like that? Because replacing performances from actors like De Niro and Pacino is almost impossible. Those characters are iconic. They defined the film, and yet somehow, Michael Mann appears ready to try. Heat 2 is based on the novel Mancio wrote with author Meg Gardner. Interestingly, the story isn't just a sequel. It's both a prequel and a continuation. The narrative jumps across time, showing events before the original movie and exploring what happens after its explosive ending. That structure opens the door for a completely new generation of actors to step into these roles. So far, two massive names have already been confirmed: Christian Bale and Leonardo DiCaprio. Just saying those two names in the same sentence already tells you something about the scale of this project. Now the big mystery is simple. Who exactly are they going to play? The Heat universe revolves around a few key characters: Vincent Hanna, the obsessive detective; Neil McCauley, the disciplined professional thief; and Chris Shields, McCauley's right-hand man. Originally, these roles were played by Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Val Kilmer, and replacing them is a casting challenge that borders on impossible. But the novel version of Heat 2 gives us a clue. The story focuses heavily on Chris Shields and explores his life both before and after the events of the first film. If there's a central character in Heat 2, it's probably him, which makes Leonardo DiCaprio an extremely interesting possibility. Shields is complicated. He's charismatic, reckless, emotionally conflicted, and deeply loyal to McCauley's crew. Over the course of the story, he evolves more than almost any other character. That kind of layered anti-hero role feels perfectly designed for DiCaprio, and if you think about Leo's career, he's played characters like that before. Men caught between ambition, loyalty, and moral ambiguity. But there's another fascinating option floating around. Some rumors suggest DiCaprio might instead portray a younger version of Vincent Hanna. That possibility would completely change the dynamic of the film. Which brings us to Christian Bale. Bale has already worked with Michael Mann before. In fact, he starred in Mann's 2009 crime drama Public Enemies, and that connection alone makes the film worth revisiting right now. Public Enemies tells the story of real-life bank robber John Dillinger, played by Johnny Depp, and the FBI agent determined to stop him, Melvin Purvis, portrayed by Christian Bale. The film is based on Brian Burrows' non-fiction book and takes place during the Great Depression, when Dillinger became one of America's most infamous criminals. While Public Enemies doesn't have the same reputation as Heat, it shares many of Mann's signature elements: precision, atmosphere, and an almost obsessive attention to how criminals and law enforcement think. The movie also features an incredible supporting cast: Marion Cotillard, Stephen Dorff, Billy Crudup, and Stephen Lang all appear in key roles. Even the smaller parts are filled with talent. Actors like Giovanni Ribisi, Jason Clarke, Carey Mulligan, and Channing Tatum pop up throughout the film, despite earning over $200 million at the box office. Public Enemies somehow slipped into an odd place in Michael Mann's filmography. It's respected, but it's rarely talked about with the same reverence as Heat, Collateral, or The Insider. Part of that may be due to its pacing. The film takes its time building tension before exploding into the intense shootouts Mann is known for, but once it finds its rhythm, the movie delivers several unforgettable sequences, and Bale's performance as Melvin Purvis proves that he can absolutely handle the role of a determined lawman hunting dangerous criminals, which is exactly why many fans believe Bale might end up playing Vincent Hanna in Heat 2. If that happens, it would create a fascinating dynamic because Bale isn't the type of actor who would simply imitate Al Pacino's performance. He would reinterpret the character completely, and that's probably the smartest approach. Heat 2 shouldn't try to recreate the magic of the original film. Instead, it should allow new actors to reshape these characters in their own way. Of course, there's another name floating around the casting rumors: Adam Driver. Driver starred in Michael Mann's 2023 film Ferrari, and for a while he was heavily rumored to play Neil McCauley in the sequel, even though McCauley only appears in certain sections of the Heat 2 novel. His presence looms over the entire story. The book actually dives deeper into his personality, explaining why he maintains such emotional distance from everyone around him. If Driver does take on the role, he could bring an entirely new dimension to the character. Imagine a cast led by DiCaprio, Bale, and Driver. That alone sounds like one of the most stacked crime film ensembles in years. Right now, the exact casting decisions are still a mystery. Maybe DiCaprio plays Shearless, maybe he plays Hannah, maybe Bale takes on a completely different role altogether. But what we do know is this: Michael Mann plans to begin filming sometime between 2026 and 2027, which means the earliest possible release would likely be around 2027, and considering Mann's recent filmography, this project could mark a major return to the genre that made him famous. His last few films have been relatively sparse. After Public Enemies in 2009, he directed Black Hat in 2015 and Ferrari in 2023. That's not a huge number of projects over nearly 2 decades, but when Mann does return to crime storytelling, he tends to make it count. Meanwhile, Christian Bale's career is ramping up again as well. After slowing down slightly in the early 2020s, he's returning with major roles in projects like The Bride and Madden. Adding Heat 2 to that lineup would be a massive moment. At the end of the day, continuing Heat is a huge creative gamble. The original film is legendary. Its characters are iconic. Its influence on crime cinema is enormous, but if there's one filmmaker capable of returning to that world with ambition and precision, it's Michael Mann. And if the final cast truly includes actors like DiCaprio and Bale, the sequel could become one of the most anticipated crime films of the decade. For now, we'll have to wait and see how the pieces fall into place. But while we're waiting, there's one thing I highly recommend: revisit Public Enemies, because that film might quietly reveal exactly how Michael Mann plans to approach Heat 2. This is Screen Radar, and if you want deeper breakdowns of upcoming movies, casting rumors, and the stories shaping Hollywood's biggest projects, stay tuned for the next video.